us on your call. There he is, Byron Cooke. Welcome to your call.
Yeah, Dan, I'm a tough one to get. I rarely do interviews, so this is a unique opportunity for you and your legions of fans. But look, you're welcome.
Yes, of
You
course.
did call me a player. Thank you.
Oh,
Obviously, you've done your research. I did play in the E.J. Whitten Legends game last year.
of course.
So technically a player. I have played on primetime television, but probably more known as a fan rather than a player.
Well, that's obviously what I was referring to. And,
Thank you.
I know you like to pump up your own tires. So I thought, look, allow me to step in and do the honors for you. So, Byron, welcome to your call. And you've got the scarf around you. So you obviously are a Swan supporter. And there's been a bit of conjecture around we've had a few, emails and faxes during the week of, is Byron actually a legitimate Swan supporter? So we wanted to get you on and tell us about we can't name names, obviously.
Well, no, I will be DMing people, and
yes.
I don't want you to see the sorts of messages that are going to go out there. I will behave like a Collingwood supporter. That's how foul my language will be.
Ooh, that's pretty bad.
Like full-blown, I will go feral on these people. No, I am legit a Swans man. It's funny, it's gone full circle for me because I've worked at Fox FM in the heart of South Melbourne now for nearly 10 years.
Good point.
Also lived in South Melbourne for many years in more recent times, but was born in Sydney and grew up watching Sydney, and now spent the last 10 years in South Melbourne, and it's just everywhere I've ever been, it's been red and white. So it's just, I am legit. My first game I ever went to was as a kid with my dad, and Sydney beat the West Coast Eagles in 1987 by about 200 points.
Yeah.
And I think Warwick Capper kicked about 29 goals. And I think it was at that point I went, wow. And you think I'm exaggerating. I can't remember how many he kicked. But no, we did legitimately. We kicked over 200 points. And it was something else, My dad grew up on rugby league. He was a big Parramatta Eels fan.
Yep.
There was just something about footy that drew me to it. And so I just love the game. As you probably, if you watch the E.J. Whitten Legends game, you'll see I never played the game. But I always loved watching the game. I loved the personalities. I loved the way the ball was, for the most part, always in play. Things were happening. It felt like there were no rules. And as a kid, obviously, if you grew up on rugby league, yawn fest. I mean, God, just 6 tackles, repeat. I mean, admire them, but just the way the game moved. As a kid in Sydney, I thought, well, this should be more popular. How good is this?
Yep. And so what was, from your memory, why that first game? Why did your dad take you along? Was it a novelty thing? Was it, obviously, it was the new game in town? Was it just, let's check this out, it's a bit of a laugh? Or what was the idea?
Back then in Sydney, even as a kid, I could understand the concept of sort of rich people doing crazy things. And we had a team owner back then, and I can't remember if this was an urban myth or not, but Dr. Jeffrey Edelston was a well-known rich celebrity in Sydney, and it was at least a rumour that he flew around in a pink helicopter, and I just found that, maybe he didn't, but everyone.
I believe it.
Jeffrey Edelston, the guy that flies around in the pink helicopter, and even around our schoolyard, I remember kids saying, yeah, and he has this doctor's practice, and all these robots are in there, like running around, and I don't know if that's true either. So, there was this certain aura around Dr. Edelston, and then you had Warwick Capper looking like he was the front man of Def Leppard, so he was cool, and I don't know, there was just something about the team. It was a one-team town. It was just hard not to get into it. I was into sports. I love my cricket and my rugby league and soccer, but there was just something about AFL and the Sydney Swans in the mid-'80s when you're a young kid, like 8, 9 years old, and you just go, well, this is just cool. I want to get into this. And so it kind of began out of almost curiosity,
These are the kind of stories that, people like Gil McLaughlin are just frothing over. This is what they want. They want expansion. They want teams in every state of the world, basically. So you're the prototype.
Well, yeah, but you know what's weird? Not so much now, because AFL is so popular in Sydney in the junior ranks, and now it's almost just a given that your kid would probably play AFL, and it's no big deal. When I came to Melbourne as a Swans fan from Sydney, everyone somehow assumed I must have been born in Victoria and gone up there as some sort of expat or something. It's like, no, I grew up in Sydney and I rooted for the Swans. And I just know so many other people that are like that. I mean, it's highly possible that if you were born in Sydney and grew up in Sydney when I did, or a bit later, that you just like the Swans and you didn't necessarily have an uncle in Melbourne or, a brother in Perth. You just like the Sydney Swans because you're from Sydney,
Yeah. So speaking on that, obviously with your job, you've been able to move around a fair bit. Coming to Melbourne then, was like coming to the holy grail of, you've come to the state where the sport you love was invented, was born. How did that feel?
Oh man, I mean, the culture of football in Melbourne is obviously, until you experience it, it's just something else, isn't it? So look, it's cool. I mean, you talk to some Swans players, and I wouldn't consider any of them my best mates, although I do stalk them all quite a bit.
Of course.
A lot of them have relative anonymity to some extent up there. A guy like Bud probably can't walk around much, but most of them are fine to kind of freely move about. And obviously, the minute they play an away game down here, it's a different story for them, and everyone's pulling them up for autographs and stuff. So there's some truth to the fact that it's just a bigger pop cultural phenomenon down in Melbourne than it is up there. But no, I remember my first grand final that I went to as a Swans fan, and I timed my run very nicely, was 2012. And
perfect.
2012 was my first grand final seeing the Swans. Yeah. Because in 2005, 2006, I was actually working and living in America, so I watched it from abroad. In '96, I guess I was a teenager and watched it at home with the fam, and that was the big prelim. And by the way, spoiler alert for the game that's on tomorrow.
Yeah.
Block your ears. Yeah. We win by a point, and Lockett kicks the behind. Sorry, I think I've ruined it. Sorry.
Well, actually, no, you've done me a favour because I was looking actually to get out of tomorrow night's commitments. So yeah,
there you go. Well, just
don't want to do it anyway.
Let your hilarious colleague know that he's running solo tomorrow because you know how it ends, and it's just not holding for you.
Why bother?
No, mate. That 2012 grand final. I have worked as an ambassador for the team for a long time, and I was the on-ground announcer for the Swans from about 2009. When I came back from America, I was just such a fan of the team. I was at Triple M in Sydney, and I just reached out to the club and said, hey, I would just love to be involved again with AFL, and if you're looking for someone, they happen to be. So for 5 years, I got to do all the announcing there at the SCG, and so 2012 was in the middle of that time for me. And so during the game, the Swans had nominated me as the host of the AFL Premiership Party. So the big party at the end, you get to MC it. Mm-hmm. And what's funny was that was the first year of the AFL Premiership Party, and Michael Gudinski had come in to book these bands. We had Temper Trap, Paul Kelly, and they worked out in subsequent years that you should have an MC standing by from both teams rather than just an MC, because I found out later that if Hawthorn won that game, I still would have had to host the actual Premiership Party.
Great.
Oh, imagine that.
Yeah.
We didn't know half the name of their players. I wouldn't have known who any of them were.
No. Yeah.
But also just feigning, oh, well done. It would have felt awful. So in subsequent years, and I've been the guy that's been on standby, unfortunately, in 2014 and in 2016, you have an opposing MC who's ready to host the event in the event that team wins. I remember in 2016, it was myself standing by to do the presentation for Sydney, and the very funny Danny McGinlay, the bannerman from the Dogs.
Sure. Yep.
He was standing by to host it in the event that the Dogs win. And we're sort of texting each other during the game going, oh, I reckon I'll be required. You won't be required. There was a bit of banter. Unfortunately, they needed Danny that night. But that was an unforgettable. I felt like I won the grand final in 2012, Dan. I cried. And I've said this even to the mother of my child. The 2012 grand final was the greatest day of my life.
Wow.
Okay. Equal to the birth of Zephyr, equal.
So the funny thing is you're talking to a footy fan. So I'm there going, I believe that. But anyone else would probably be outraged over that. So, but I was almost feeling the same at 2018. But sadly, not to be. So
Right.
we'll get
Yeah.
there.
Look.
We'll get there eventually. But I know what you mean. But speaking of doing the emceeing and being the Swans ambassador and doing the match day things, you talk about being, the losing MC on the day, but you did time your run very well, because you see all the MCs on the grounds doing the pump up, warm up. You imagine if you're these days Gold Coast Suns MC on the pitch.
Tough
Come
gig,
on, guys,
tough gig.
we're only 100 points down. Get out of your seat. Come on. That's a tough gig. That's a very tough gig.
Oh, imagine this one, even worse. The Carlton MC.
Oh.
What do you do? I mean, I'd
Wouldn't do it if you paid me.
I just get Feb on every half time and, have a bit of fun with it. But no, mate, I think you realise when you see other teams, even the Giants last year, just to make the big dance for your team as a fan, you do realise, even as a Swans fan, and we've been pretty lucky in recent times, but like, it's cool to even be there. So even like 2014 was obviously a debacle, and the whole team want to try and forget that one for us. But just to make it, and as a fan, it's just amazing. You just got to soak it all in. It's so good, and you should never take it for granted. Even I guess Geelong fans and Richmond fans now, just don't take it for granted, because it's just, as a fan, there's nothing better, as you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I was lucky enough to go to 2018, and we were talking to Generic Tyson O'Brien last week about he spent thousands of dollars flying from Los Angeles to be in Melbourne for 2 days for the grand final parade and the grand final. And regardless of how it ended, that's a fun story. And it was. You had plenty of stories about it, and just the atmosphere of the week in Melbourne. It's for your team to be a part of it, to walk down the street wearing your gear, going, "We made it." Doesn't matter really what happens. That's great.
For a lot of people, Dan, that's a big deal. But for Generic, when you've got the residency with Calvin Harris in Vegas, he can afford. That's just money in his ashtray for Generic. Yeah. I mean, no big deal for him. But for your average punter like me, that's a big commitment. Absolutely.
Now, so we're obviously covering the game 96. What are your memories? Where were you in 96? We can talk about that game, but specifically around that year. Do you remember how you were feeling about the Swans that year? Were you surprised that you made it to the big dance that year?
You sort of went for the Swans just because it was a fun, cool thing to do. And honestly, obviously we're always competitive. We're never a joke. But the idea of playing in a grand final or even winning a grand final, that was massive in Sydney. Like that, the people who didn't care about the Swans, you talk about the bandwagon as like the Bulldogs that year. Where did those fans come from, by the way? Like when the NCG was full, who were those people?
Where was Danny? Anyway, I never heard of Danny McGinlay before the Bulldogs made a grand final.
He jumped on, didn't he, right at the end? They were all right to wacky banners. No, in Sydney, that was such a big deal. So the TV ratings, I think if you Google the TV ratings from 1996, I think that grand final was one of the most watched sporting events in Australian history, because everyone in Sydney watched that game, even if they didn't even know the rules of AFL. Yeah. And then you had the Roos at the time in the grand final with Duck, and all the superstars there. So it was just such a huge thing. But that prelim, I was just watching it at home. I wasn't at the ground. It was before my media days, Dan, where, I had the correct, access all areas. No, I've often paid to go to the game. But no, I didn't go. But obviously, watch it on Channel 7 tomorrow. Obviously, it's just a cracking finish. Yeah. The names that were out there for us, a teenage Mickey O'Loughlin was out there, and he was already brilliant as a teenager. Kickett was out there. You forget that Kickett, Paul Kelly, the legendary Paul Kelly in the midfield. I mean, it was Stewie Maxfield, who was just one of the toughest, fittest players ever in the history of the game, and still works with our club. It was great, man. That was a cracking game.
At that time, because it was massive news, it was probably the biggest story in AFL, probably forever. When Plugger went to the Swans, it was outrageous. And no player had ever done that with that kind of money. So for you, you've been through that. Did you think that Buddy was maybe Plugger part 2?
I reckon Sydney, it's a little bit Hollywood in that sense of, like, Sydney people do want to latch on to a superstar or someone that stands out. So we have, if you think about it, you have your Warwick Cappas, you have your Plugger Lockets. Barry Hall, who was a harder-edged version of that, also had a big profile. You want that high-profile, full-forward superstar with that swag. I mean, 2012 was interesting because if you look at our forward line, and I love him, he's a friend of mine, but the GOAT Lewis Roberts-Thompson played in our forward line that year, and we won the flag. Like we didn't have a Buddy or a Plugger or a Barry Hall that year and managed to win the flag. So you don't necessarily need to have that person to win. But I think Sydney does always gravitate towards that kind of personality. So whilst it was a surprise to get Buddy, it came out of left field for everyone. It kind of made sense once you could process it. And look, full disclosure, I will stand up here. Hang on. Here's my
Oh,
hoodie.
no.
Here's my hoodie. Hang on. There you go.
Oh, of course. Is this
There you go.
official merchandise, the official BF
Yeah.
Buddy merchandise?
Yeah, Buddy has his own range. Buddy Authentic.
Yeah.
He's bigger than the game. He's bigger than the team. No, but we just love Buddy. We, you know, I think he's still playing great footy. It's one of my great regrets this year. There's 100 reasons where we're
Yeah.
frustrated there's no footy, but I just reckon, I know he had a bit of an injury in the pre-season, but you just want to cherish these last couple of years and enjoy him.
Yep.
So maybe this rest has given him a chance to get rid of whatever niggles he had, and if we do get to see some footy, I just can't wait to see him again.
It's actually a great segue because I think of, my shame for this year was I had plans to go see the great LeBron James. Haven't seen him play ever. And again, like a Buddy, he's a player you would fly interstate for. Thinking time's not on his side. I want to be able to say that I saw the great man play. I walked in the arena, there he was. I can tick that off and move on. So moving on to basketball, my partner, Danny Bayful, who obviously is the other part of your call, what we do here, he wants to ask you about the Clippers. He noticed a bit of Clippers paraphernalia on yourself during the show and on your social media profile. You're not a bandwagon since the great Claude joined the team.
Well, having said that, we welcome all the bandwagoners. We
love
them. So please join the Clippers. Follow us, LA Clippers on Instagram. No, for me, I was obsessed with American culture. My grandfather was American. My dad's half American. I did end up marrying an American, divorced an American. I have an American son.
Did it all.
But I've always been obsessed with LA. But consider this, Dan. You're obsessed with LA, but then you're an Aussie, and so there's this underdog mentality.
Yes.
So combine LA and underdog, and you just have to root for the Clippers, right? So ever since I was a kid, I rooted for the Clippers, and I've seen it all. Probably from about early 2000s, we had a team that at least contended for playoffs. So you never really thought you were going to win a championship.
Mm-hmm.
So it is pretty cool. Like, I've followed them really closely, especially probably the last 4 or 5 years, or 10 years, really. Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, the big three, Chris Paul. But now the moves that we've made with this owner we have, I mean, we are so legit. I mean, the Laker fans won't admit it, but they are genuinely scared by what we're doing, even with the team they have. No, I genuinely believe that they are scared. And that's another great regret. Like, let's just get rid of this wretched damn thing so that we can watch the Clippers win the chip.
Yeah.
This year, man.
You're the chips with the dip.
If they play, we win. And you've heard it here first on your call to the 35 or 40 people watching us right now. No, I'm just kidding. I've obviously reduced those numbers. I'm being self-deprecating.
You're being very humble.
You heard it here first. The Clippers win the chip. If we get to play the season, we win. Maybe in front of no one, which, by the way, would be the most Clippers scenario ever. To finally be good, and to win in front of nobody would be sort of typical of us. But no, I love the team. My son loves the team. We're actually Feb 28th. The Clippers played a big regular season game against the contender, the Nuggets. And I went with Zephyr, and we ended up on the floor. We ended up bombing out in trivia in front of the entire Staples Center. Adam Sandler was literally pointing at us and mocking at us for getting a question wrong. But that was one of the last games played before they shut the whole season. So that was my last visit to spend some time with my son. And we just scraped in a big NBA game, which we won, and it was cool. And, the Clippers are a lot of fun to watch with PG and Kawhi and Lou Williams and Trez. And I mean, we're a fun team. If you've got a passing interest in NBA, a lot of Clippers games are now on ESPN because we are exciting and we do have those stars. So, we're a fun team to watch.
There you go. Well, Danny's just commented, actually, because he's a Lakers man. So he says if the Clippers win, he'll wear a jersey for all to see.
Well, you know what?
So it's worth it for that.
I'll put Danny in the City Edition jersey, which even the Laker fans admit is like the best basketball jersey to ever come out of LA. We've got this cool City Edition in the black and white with a certain font on it. The
Grand Theft Auto kind of font?
Yeah, and even the Laker fans go, no, we'll pay that. That's a lot better than our hideous purple and gold, awful shirts that we wear.
Yeah, not great. Byron, you've been very generous with your time. It's isolation, obviously. You've got a busy night of drinking whatever that is. Looks like a Red Bull vodka. I really hope it's not.
Give me some credit. I mean, actually, normally it would be. But no, I've got a new poison. It is the Macallan, the magnificent Macallan Highland single malt. This is a 12-year-old double cask. Magnificent. And as you can see, it's now empty.
Wow. Well, we've got you at a good time. We're not going to let you leave, though, without covering the big one, obviously. We'll cover it quickly, though. The EJ Whitten game. Firstly, how?
How did I get on the field? I still ask that question.
How were you there? Yes.
Yeah, to this day, I ask that question. I'll quickly leave you with this. Imagine this, right? Think of a sport. You obviously like to have a kick, right? What's a sport? What's an elite sport, Dan, that you've never played, even as in, say you said tennis. I mean, as in, you've never picked up a racket and even tried to hit it over the net. Like, what's a sport you haven't even had any involvement in?
I would say, let's go horse racing, for example.
Okay, so, great. So here's the analogy. You have never ridden a horse and some mate of yours, right? So the Feb equivalent of horse racing, I don't know, Damien Oliver says, hey, Dan, I've got this funny idea. For charity, you're going to ride in the Melbourne Cup against the greatest jockeys that have ever ridden.
All stars.
And you're going to have no training. You're going to have absolutely, you're not even going to go for a practice ride. We're just going to send you to the barrier and racing. They're away. Mate, I hadn't even kicked a footy in a park. I'd always watched footy. I played other sports. I hadn't even so much as barely touched a Sharon. And my first touch of a ball, as it turns out, I didn't get any touches. My first attempted touch of a ball is on national primetime television. I didn't know what I was doing there, but God, it was fun. I've got to say, it was so much fun to run through the banner with some of the greats of the history of the game. I've still pinched myself that even happened. Thank you, Fair, for the opportunity. He just wanted to smash me, by the way. He wanted me to play on him, and he had all these scenarios where he was going to deck me, but he went off injured, right?
Oh, good.
So my coach, Wayne Carey, decided, because I was a power player, it was double points for my goals. He decided to play me as full forward. What did this? So I was out of position, and
Duck
to this day I say,
Duck didn't realize that double of nothing is still nothing. So
correct.
That's where his maths weren't good that day.
I'll leave you with this. At one point in the final quarter, I had fresh legs. I'd only been out there for 5 minutes in the first quarter. I literally said, and these are all old blokes out there. We can swear on this, right? Can't we?
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Right. They're all fucked. These blokes are fucked. They can't breathe. They can't move. I say to Duck, mate, I'm good to go. He looked at me straight in the face and said, Cookie, we'd rather play one short.
Oh, jeez. You go, so there's no chance? I'm thinking there's still a chance. No.
Not even on a comedy level. So anyway, mate, it was a great experience. Please, nobody Google Byron Cooke, EJ Whitten Legends game. Do not do that. We're definitely not going to cut up highlights of this interview and play it overlaid on repeat. No,
we are definitely not. That is off limits. It was in your contract. Your agent said
that would be mean.
Yeah.
Like, say right now, for example, there was an inset of me missing the ball from point blank range and actually somehow
right here.
And maybe somehow kicking it backwards, which is Bruce McAvaney said to me the next day, that actually takes more skill to kick the ball backwards with your back heel. If that was on the screen right now while we talk about it, that would be really mean and not in the spirit. No.
Just rude, especially in these trying times.
No, that's not the time for those sorts of jokes. Don't do it.
No.
Yeah, good on you for not doing it.
Thank you. It's not appropriate. I've seen that little highlight. It's calamity after calamity. It's almost put the Benny Hill music over it. It's comedy perfection.
Thank you so much. But again, don't do that either. Don't do that either in post-production.
Let me just jot that down. Byron Cooke, 1/3 of the let's be real. The Byron, Fifi, and Fev show on the Fox Network. Melbourne, you're back. Did you have a break this week? I think the Triple M boys had a break this week.
A couple of weeks ago. No, we're back full
time
team on deck. Yep. So 6 a.m. Monday, 6 till 9. Byron, Fifi, and Fev. A fantastic show. That's the new branding. So really excited that they've changed the branding. And we'll talk to you Monday morning.
Looking forward to it, Byron. Thank you very much for your time. And go Swannies.
Cheers, Dan. Go Swannies.